bring extra duct tape and a shovel.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming this afternoon. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Irvin, from the Soft Solutions Architect at Alert Logic. Eric.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. This is a little talk we put together. Elizabeth and I, we've been talking a lot about. I work for a security vendor, and so I see a lot of the sausage making behind the scenes, and hopefully, all of you have some type of experience of engaging a vendor, and you kind of know some of the issues you kind of run into. And so, what I want to kind of talk about is some of the problems that exist in the security product market space. So, I kind of gave it some kind of nice little, silly title there, and kind of go into it. We're going to talk about me. We're going to talk about economics for you guys, why the security product industry is destined to fail in a lot of ways, and how supply-side economics sucks. And I'm using that if you're an economist. It's not true supply-side economics. It's product-based supply-side economics. How I got here and arrived to these conclusions, and then how vendors are hacking you. And a lot of that's from my personal experience of being in over probably 2,000 sales cycles with everything from Fortune 10 companies to mom and pop guys that are just trying to meet some kind of compliance check mark. And I can assure you all that this is all related. It might seem like a lot of different topics, but at the end of the day, we're going to pull it all together and circle it back up. So it's a small room here, so I think we can kind of take the whole B-sides methodology. You can interrupt me and ask me or call me out on anything. But has anyone here, is anyone currently in like a sales cycle with a security vendor? You are? Okay. So we have at least one person who can provide some anecdotal evidence of.
Oh God, I'm only 3 weeks old, so I really can't.
Nice. Yeah.
Could you say where you work again and where you worked before?
Sure. Thank you. So currently I work at a company called Alert Logic. It's like you looked at my deck already. And then previously I worked at a company called Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama. They were a Blue Cross Blue Shield franchise. I worked for Regions Financial Bank and a regional hosting provider. Ran my own MSP back when you could do that at like 19 and 20 years of age. And then I was a male model for all of my family videos and pictures. And I still do that. So if you need some help, you need an action shot, photo bomb, I'm up for doing that. And I got over 150 years of combined security experience because I set up several Second Life characters that were also in security. So I'm going to count their collective years of experience to kind of get me to that point. So and that's my Twitter account, so you can always see the stupid ramblings I make. Elizabeth can also attest to this as well, and I think she's in the same boat, so I apologize, I'm going to call you out here. But I like to consider myself someone that likes to pull the pin on grenades and throw it out there and to see what happens. And so a lot of times we do go back and forth. I do work for a security vendor. They provide my paycheck. Sorry, I just realized I was out of the frame there. They provide my paycheck, and they also approve my expenses. So my flight up here from Houston, Texas, my hotel room, my meals, and a few of the beverages I drank last night, all allows me to do stuff like this. And my bosses are kind of cool with the fact that they know that I'm going here and I'm speaking. They don't ask a lot of questions, so they don't realize that I really do like to pull the curtain back and show some of the dirty things that we and other people do. And I think it's important for you guys to realize this because when you're going through risk assessments, when you're evaluating how you're going to solve a problem you have in your organization, you look at a control and you assume that control is going to reduce that risk. But there's some assumptions you make in that. You assume the control is going to work. You're going to assume it's going to work all the time. And we know that's not the case. We look at things like antivirus, which tends to fail a lot. It becomes a joke. It's just like network-based firewalls, which they tend to fail because they don't solve application layer attacks. There's a lot of assumptions we make that this control is going to reduce this risk that the vendor doesn't tell you about. We get you all excited about the sizzle, and we don't tell you that the steak is really more of a fish-based flank steak, and it's not even really a flank steak. It's more of a meat-like byproduct in some cases. So if you learn how to kind of spot when these things are happening, you learn to ask the hard questions, you at least then get all the facts, and then when you have to make that decision of, well, it's only 80% of what I need, but it's okay enough, then you can make that leap across the risk threshold. So we're going to start this off with building a network, and let's assume we have 100 servers, file, print, DB, app, web, all that stuff. What are the security tools? We don't have to go through all of them, but I was just going to get from you guys. What are all the things we would need to protect those assets?
Two-factor authentication.
Wow, we're already in the hard stuff. Okay. So I'm just going to put MFA. What was the other one?
Firewall.
Yeah, firewalls. IDS, IPS. What else you got?
How about configuration management, number one, or patch management, or anything else?
What would you get?
Smart people.
Smart people. Those people, they cost money though. So exactly.
But is there a product you can sell?
I could sell all this. So
How about
No.
outsource managed service?
that's true. Managed services. That's a way to kind of consolidate that. The list can go on for a long time. We also could add, some kind of host-based IDS, IPS. We could add some type of WAF for our web application. We could do some kind of database audit trail and security management. The net of all this is everything we've talked about is some type of product or service-based solution to security. And then what you run into is, while it's 100 servers, and those 100 servers might have cost you, whether you're using a cloud-based services and they're costing you about 10 grand a month, or you bought them all and they've cost you a couple $100,000 to get all this stuff, you're now invested in security. So each one of these products, there's a price tag. The firewall you got to pay for. IPS, IDS, the smart people, you're having to pay their bill every month. You got consultants you're having to buy. You also got benefits you got to buy. You got to buy health insurance for these guys. There's a lot of cost to this, and it gets very expensive very fast. And the other thing is it becomes recurringly expensive. While you might have bought that server and you might be able to get 5 years of useful life out of it before you got to depreciate it off the books and get a new server, hardware and software for security tends to recur every 2 or 3 years. There's a new hardware platform you have to move to, or there's a renewal bill that you have to buy. And so when we start talking about security, we got to make some uncomfortable decisions at a certain point. At a certain point, we have so much bloat from all these point-based products. And even if we get smart and we find some good UTM-type devices to reduce those into single-factor appliances, pretty quickly we could be upside down, where we have to eventually get to the point of we're out of budget for security, so we either have to let one of the smart guys go, or we have to choose which product we don't renew and which thing we go without. Or we have to get creative and get the smart people to buy some open source or put some open source products out there. So when we look at it, we have to ask ourselves, how much will security cost us in hardware, software, renewals and upgrades? And then you got training. Training's the thing we often forget about. And our product, we don't really have like a training thing, but I remember when I worked at Blue Cross, we bought this really nice content acceleration engine that also provides some content filtering. And there was a 2-week boot camp you could go to in San Diego, which sounded awesome to me because San Diego seems like a cool place to go to. I went to the training, and pretty quickly I realized, no, there's actually real training. Like from 8 to 5, you're sitting in a room every day learning how to use this package, learning all this stuff. And while we'll probably only consume maybe 10% of the configuration of it, that's a lot of time spent. And then if I leave, which I did shortly thereafter, to go work for a security company, someone else has to come in and go through that training. And so your bosses then at that point, they get really burnt out on the products and services they bought because it becomes expensive to take you off your job to do that stuff. So looking at it, supply versus demand. Security supply tends to be the product, services, and people. And you can even talk about the dirty side of supply, like 0 days, rootkits, botnets. All that tends to be forms of supply. And then demand. Demand tends to work off of compliance, security best practices, shame, fines, legal guidance, and in fact, it's cool. Now, this right here, this is all marketing for my company, right? That's how we market our products. We market off compliance. We market it off of fear. We market off of Stuxnet and Flame and all the other stuff in the newspaper. And people then go and they buy this stuff based off of these demands right there. And that's how we make money. It's how I get paid to go to places like this. And so when you start looking at this, you kind of start seeing why there's some issues where this creates some problems because it's not a perfect market. Again, going into the products, and a lot of these we ended up with on here. In the product side, you got firewalls, and even the Pepsi generation, next generation firewalls, whatever you want to call them. IPS, IDS, HIPS, HIDS, and even in services, which are your SaaS, your MSSPs, which Elizabeth called out for that. Your consultants, your pen tests are also considered services because you're consuming them on one-time use or multi-time use. And then you got your people. You got your CXO, your CISO, your smart people, as you mentioned earlier. So these are all the different types of supplies that we work with. And so where do you find supply? Well, you got development companies, and that tends to be the big guys that you know about, like Symantec, McAfee, Cisco, all those guys, the big boys. Then you got VARs, the people that are reselling those products and services. And they're not all up here, so I apologize if there's a vendor in the room and I didn't mention your company's name. I think I actually put our name on there because I have to do a cheap plug for that. But then you got your MSSPs, which either they make the software or they're reselling or servicing someone else's software. And those are Dell SecureWorks, TrustWave. We make our products. You get Still Secure, BT Counterpane, Verizon, AT&T. And then you got your consultants, which will come in and tell you what you need to do. And they'll typically point you towards which of these you need or which of those you need. And lastly, your people, your employees and your contractors. So that's where you tend to find the supply of it. And this is going to lead us towards our problem we're moving towards, which is when we look at the security model, and we know the CIA triad, because if you ever studied the CISSP or Security Plus, I think it kind of points you towards this direction of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But then you have these controls. You got your products, and you got your people and your procedures. And those are the ways that you kind of maintain your CIA triad.
So can I interrupt you real quick?
Of course, please do.
Can you go back just one slide? I just wanted to point out, I don't know if everyone else experiences this, but where do you find supply? I find a lot of people, I understand that it's people, but conferences, shows,
Good point.
things like that, you see a lot of folks that go to, this happens to me a lot where the executives go to, some show and they see something shiny.
Yeah.
And they want it so bad and they're just stuck on it. They
Yeah.
are stuck, and no matter what, so they launch this whole process for this one shiny item that
They get hooked on the marketing message. They go to RSA and they hear about some cool next generation thing. Anyone ever gotten burnt or with my boss just brought this product in for me to own? Do you want to do it? Dare?
For those that can't see him, he's raising his hand.
Repeatedly?
Over and over again?
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to insert my own marketing messages in the glossies in the back of airline ads so I can get the product I want. Because this seems to be more effective than reason some days.
I travel a good bit with my job, and I can't tell you how many times I have a customer tell me, I haven't seen your ads at an airport before. And I'm like, oh, wow, so that's how we should be marketing to you.
I don't know why that works. It
Yeah.
works.
I keep thinking that there's a great message you could, if you could put it into a urinal or something. I mean, yeah.
In an airport.
In an airport, that's
Right.
true. That happens a lot. Later on I'll talk about it more specifically, but we just like most security product companies, we've got a little twist towards how we provide our service, and that's sort of the sizzle. That's sort of the, oh, that's really cool. If we get that message to a CIO or a CEO, they love that. They dig in on that. If I'm sitting across the table from an engineer or someone that actually has to consume that product, they say, so what? What does it work? What does it do? How does it compare to these other guys or this other product I'm currently using? How does it save me time when I'm running my own Snort instance, for example? They ask real questions, but a lot of times, it's, oh, shiny, it's a new Lexus, I love it, let's look at it. How much does it cost? Here's a check. And we hack around that. I'll tell you firsthand, I've got sales guys that the first thing they'll do is, all right, we're going to go to lunch. We're going to talk to these guys. I want you to take the engineers. You're going to sit on this side of the table. We're going to sit on this side of the table. You're going to keep them occupied and play in the sandbox. And when we walk away, I'm going to get a PO from this guy. It absolutely happens, and it's dirty, but it's the game. And that's why we're at the end of this. I got some dirty tricks we use that you guys need to be aware of. And when you spot that happening, hack around that just yourself. It's all about social engineering. So what's the problem with that? Well, let's look at the old way to kind of, and if this is 101 stuff, I apologize, but you've got kind of the vulnerability, which is the fence hole, and then you got the exploit, which is crawling through it. You got the threat agent and loss hysteria. This is an old school thing I got from an old security textbook, and we all realize it. But this is how the marketplace works in security. These right here tend to create the need for products and services, right? So when we look at that, we kind of look at what's happened between 1990 and 2005 and the types of attacks that we're seeing. We saw the sophistication of attacks. Sophistication required kind of went down, and the attacks kind of went up at the same time. The tools got better, and the knowledge and time that the attacker had to spend preparing for that went down. But each one of these created some type of technology to address the risk, right? Password guessing right there. Account lockout, complex passwords, multi-factor authentication, password cracking, same thing, viruses and backdoors, malware. The entire antivirus industry is kind of built around those kinds of threats. So each one of these created a product or a service that people then had to go and buy and consume and purchase. So let me ask you questions. What do the following companies here have in common? And if I missed a company, again, apologize, but LogLogic, Tipping Point, Darkside, Nitro Security, ISSS, Foundstone, Sonic Wall. Does anyone know what those companies all have in common?
Traditionally, commercial point solutions.
That's one right there. The other one is they've all been bought. They don't exist anymore, or they do exist, but they've been purchased by either private equity or they've been purchased by McAfee or Cisco or one of the other big guys. That's Cisco, WebSense, RSA, McAfee, IBM, McAfee, HP, and those guys got bought by private equity. So these guys don't exist anymore. They had a product and it's off the market. Now, in comparison, what do these companies all have in common? And there's a couple asterisks on that. But McAfee, Symantec, Cisco. What's that?
Still around.
They are still around, and they're all publicly traded. Or they've got asterisks, which means they're about to go IPO. So those guys are about to be making a lot of money. Would have been nice to be day one employee there. And how about these guys? Rapid7. I got us on there again.
They're ripe for the picking.
Exactly. So that's sort of the other situation we run into. The market tends to be segregated between these guys who have a cool product and a cool story, and then these guys will go and buy those guys and take them off the market. And what happens? Development sucks. They don't put any more money into it because they got to recover the expense it costs to buy the guys. The product gets embedded with other products and solutions, so it kind of gets watered down to a certain extent. But then you got these guys who have the issue of they've got their duty is not just to their customers, but they have an equal, if not greater, duty to their shareholders. They have to make profit. They got to make money. That's what businesses and corporations are in the business of doing. So therefore, there's pressure on these guys to sell more, to charge less, to cut costs. When they cut costs, one easy place to go is headcount. Another place to go is development. So once one of these guys goes to here, the problem tends to go, the product suffers. It's not that great. But then you got these guys, and Rapid7's got a cool story. I love those guys. A lot of good friends that work there. Blue Coat, even us, we're on the radar. And when you have companies like this, you ask yourself the question of, they have a cool technology, they have a cool story, but why aren't they owned by someone else yet? Is the technology not great? They don't want to get bought by someone else? Or how much longer can they go off the private equity? Because obviously these companies had significant investments, millions of dollars that were put into them to develop product. Eventually someone's going to want that money back. So the ways these guys end up going, either they stay private and nothing changes. They go public, they set up an IPO, and they become the Palo Alto Networks or the Trustwave or whatever the latest, greatest IPO is. Or they get gobbled up, which leads us to this. You guys, anyone know what this is?
I can't see.
I apologize. It's the Gartner hype cycle, and it's a pretty cool little chart that shows how technology gets hyped up and how it gets accepted over time. And all of these guys, when they eventually began with one product or service in the security side, they fit in somewhere on the hype cycle. And and kind of go through those definitions. I don't want to have to read it all to you right there, but you got the trigger, which is kind of when the things break off, and either it's a proof of concept stories, there's some media behind it, and this is often kind of what's considered the alpha period for technology. And this is really interesting because there's a lot of cloud-based security companies that are in this spot. There's a lot of hype behind them. There's an idea of how the technology could work, and a lot of people get behind that. And then everyone rushes to it, and there's this period of inflated expectations. And we kind of saw this with the Palo Alto Network story, where everyone got real excited because of the stuff it could do. I mean, it's next generation. It can really do some cool stuff that traditional network-based firewalls can't do. It can look at application layer stuff right there. And then everyone's like, that can solve all my problems. That's what I need. And on top of it, it's got IPS in it. It's got DLP in it. But it's not a UTM. It's next generation. And then there's this trough of disillusionment. And that's when interest kind of wanes and people kind of realize, well, it's not the magic bullet. It's not going to solve all of my problems. It's not going to help Greta in accounting who is using a username and password of 12345. And after that, people start to realize, man, this might not be the best thing for me. And then after that, there's the slope of enlightenment where people sort of realize, all right, now I know what it does. I get it. I know I need it, which kind of leads to that plateau of productivity, which is where it finally starts paying for itself. So going back here, you kind of see where the visibility of the company or the technology or the solution, it gets all excited, then it kind of drops, and then eventually becomes accepted. And there's some areas where this didn't work out well. SIM technologies kind of followed that. SIM technologies came out in the mid-'90s, and there was this whole idea of it was going to solve all of our problems, and then people realized it actually just creates a lot of work, and it's very expensive, very time-consuming. But when people realized that, it made sense for some organizations, so it does still exist. NAC technologies haven't quite worked out as well. Has anyone here deployed a NAC solution, or even know what NAC is? It's you do? Gotcha. It's a really cool idea and concept, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a second, but it just fell off right after this, and it never quite really built back up.
What about GRC?
GRC. The auditor.
Does anyone have a GRC solution?
Okay, GRC, if you're not familiar, it stands for Governance, Risk, and Compliance, and it's a tool that is a lot of workflow management and audit proof. You want to throw some more to the definition at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it is defined, but essentially it's designed to manage your security program, manage the evidence for all the different compliance requirements. And I personally, working as a vendor, have, when I worked for vendors, experienced no less than 3 acquisitions of companies for a vendor that they bought for the GRC, and it fail.
Yeah, it's and the thing is, every one of these little hype cycles, there's a legitimate need behind that hype, right? I mean, GRC. I remember when I worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield, we had at any given time we had 5 auditors in our organization. We had state auditors, we had HIPAA auditors, we had Medicare auditors. We had all these guys coming in to look at our books and look at everything. And finally, we're like, hey, there's got to be a better way. It's like one of those late night TV ads, and we heard of the whole idea of GRC, and it's like, hey, this is cool. So we can do the work once, and then if there's like a question, we just do this workflow where we send the email to the guy, and the guy sends his response or takes his evidence and sends it back over. But very quickly, it just kind of waned off, and we realized, you know what? While we're trying to implement this and change the way people do things, we still got auditors coming in and day out, and we can't have these guys, not get their audits done. So, kind of, dovetailing off of that and moving forward to this, what this kind of tends to create is, as we said earlier, when you have a vulnerability, the example was NAC. Someone plugs in a laptop to your network. And so the solution was developed. They said, hey, let's develop software that looks when laptops are put on the network. And then what happens next? Well, it becomes productized in that company. The company is being built. Company built, nice. I worked on this last night. People are hired, right? You hire some developers. The technology is improved. You hire marketing teams. You have sales teams. You have HR. And now you've got a company built around a problem. What ends up happening with NAC, though, is that it kind of didn't really. I'll talk about it didn't really execute the way it was supposed to. NAC tended to create a lot of problems. The fact that it was going to interrogate a laptop and say, well, it's got to have the latest version of antivirus on it. Well, what happens when your consultant that you're paying $250 an hour comes on site, and instead of running McAfee EPO, he's running Symantec, SEP, and he can't go through your process. And now he's locked off the network, and he's sitting around there twiddling his thumbs while you're contacting your network admins, asking them to release his MAC address onto the network. And so quickly that kind of waned out there. But again, it begins with NAC, but it also ends with the company. And as we said earlier, companies are being built to either be run independently, which tends to be kind of boring because eventually someone invests some money, they want to see some return on it. The companies tend to get sold, and those are the guys we mentioned earlier. They tend to go IPO, or they grow, and that does happen too. Companies acquire. We just bought a WAF provider, for example, and it was the situation where a company was being run independently, and they were running for 5 years, and the guy wanted a paycheck, and he wanted to quit having to work every day, and so we bought his company, and he's gone, and we got the technology for it. So that's what happens with security products. So when we talk about it, I love these slides, by the way. These are all great stories, but it used to be about the music. It used to be about the security. By the way, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can see that or not. That's from, I just blanked on it, I'm sorry.
These were your home pictures.
They are actually. There I am right there with my friend Millhouse, MTV. But anyways, why is this important, and why do we care about this? Well, quality tends to suffer over time with security products. We mentioned earlier with Q&A, that goes down, development goes down, even the risk of the threat goes down, because after a bad guy realizes that every single company out there that has any type of PII or PHI or credit card information behind it is going to run a firewall, they're going to quit doing as many network scans. Those guys are always going to be out there, but they're going to realize that I'm going to target your application, so they're going to go up. And this happened with this concept called AETs. Do you guys remember what APTs are? I hope. Yeah. I could talk all day about APTs, but AETs were a type of attack that was developed by an IDS vendor. And it's kind of a cool story. So this independent company decided to test all these IDS products and see who was the best. And this one company got lambasted on. I mean, they did awful on that test. And they met with them. They said, hey, what methodology did you use? How did you test the products? They said, well, we used evasion technology. So instead of sending a 3-way handshake, we sent a 4-way handshake. You know, we did a send, we did a send, we did an ACK, and then we did a send. And by doing that, we evaded your technology. They said, whoa, you're not supposed to do that. Well, the bad guys do. Well, here's what the company did. They marketed that message. They improved their products. They looked for those technologies, and they said, hey, we're the first anti-evasion technology approved IDS product out there. And so this became a marketing trend where companies started diving in on that and saying, hey, we're protected against AET attacks. It's not a new attack. It's something that's been around for years. I mean, there was an old RFC post that talked about the problem with the 4-way handshake and how if you're looking for just one type of attack, you're going to miss that. And so, you know, and then the other side of that is that also companies and products lead us into a false sense of security. Your bosses will buy an IPS saying this is going to stop bad guys from getting in or out of my network. But if you got a machine that's infected with malware and it's trying to call out the internet and your IPS is blocking it, you still got a machine that's infected. That's not the problem. It's just one solution of many. So a lot of times we buy these things and we feel good about them. It's old Tommy Boy reference. We'll go into that one. But competition is good, but commoditization can be good as well. As long as you got products that are competing on different playing fields, you can never compare those two products together. And that's why commoditization can kind of be good for us, because in the situation where the IDS was being detected, you could tell, I'm going to try 20 different attacks and see which IDS catches it and compare that. But if each one's trying to differentiate ourselves and say, well, I'm only good for application types of attacks, and you should only use me for application attacks, and these guys say, well, we're only good for DDoS attacks, and we should only be used for that, as long as that's the case, you're going to need two different products for two different problems. So a lot of times it's good if we can kind of set the playing field on the even side right there. And then we often buy products and services on the sizzle, and that's what we mentioned earlier. I can't tell you how many times I've sent across from a CIO, and I just know in my heart that this guy does not know what his problem is. He's hooked on my message. He's hooked on what we're talking about. And again, I'll be honest, I'm going to take his check and I'm going to cash it, and I love the guy for it, and I'm going to visit him once a quarter and buy him a steak and a beer. But the fact is, people still in the marketplace don't know what their risks are or what problems they're trying to solve. They get so hooked in on this guy that's giving a lot of attention. It's a lot like being the nerdy guy in a bar, and then the girl comes up and starts talking to you. You're like, wow, I'm being paid attention to. It's like that way in the marketplace as well. So again, you can trust me. I sell things. Don't trust anyone else, but you can trust me. And security products and services companies, remember, they're sales companies. They're in business to make a profit. They're not there to be your best friend. They're not there because they're concerned about your risk assessment. They're there to sell a product. So remember that. Keep that in mind when you're talking to them. And it doesn't make them unethical, evil, or wrong. I got a lot of good friends that are sales guys. They're fun to party with. They buy my drinks for me. I love them. But it also means that they have to make a conscious choice if they're going to be ethical. They have to make a choice if they're going to be good or they're going to be right. So therefore, when you're making decisions of buying products, don't buy the sales guy. Buy the solution that best fits your problem. So this goes into the dirty secrets, and I'm going to invite Elizabeth up here, who's going to give us a little hand right here, because she can also provide some anecdotal evidence from her experience in the sales side. But the first dirty secret that you got to know about salespeople is...
Am I supposed to get up or
you can sit there. I don't mind. These guys can look at me. Hey, Mom. Dirty secret, though, is that deal today is most likely a deal tomorrow. Don't buy the artificial pressure of, you can only get this pricing for 30 days and it expires in this date. In software-based companies, we are on a quarterly system, and we starts off with January, which is a fun month because we're going out and meeting a lot of people, but we're not doing a lot of business. It gets into February, where my boss is like, all right, guys, we got March coming, let's get some deals in. And then you got March, where we're actually working 8-hour days, and we're actually getting calls from our boss. And then the last day of the month is all right, I don't care what you got to do, make that price happen, and you send some special pricing over. Well, if you don't buy, you don't buy. Maybe it's not a good time for you. Maybe you don't have the budget. Maybe it's not something you're ready to buy yet. So next day, ask them, say, hey, look, we're still interested in this, but I need this pricing in 2 weeks. And if it's not good, then this conversation's over. You'll get that pricing. I mean, I don't know if Elizabeth, you worked on both sides of that, but
Yeah, so my current role, I work for a reseller, and predominantly I do professional services, but I'm responsible for the security practice. My experience is very different than Eric's because I have to everything he's talking about, we have to manage with our partners on a really large scale, right? So we've got, at the end of the month, we have 20 vendors calling us, or the end of the quarter. We've got every single solitary vendor wanting to know what our pipeline is and this and that. So what we do with our clients is we have the open, honest conversations. We talk about these guys behind their backs all the time and say, listen, oh, thanks. And say, listen, I don't think, is this working? Oh.
it's just for you, stream.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because otherwise it just
Do you
can't
have to
be-
turn it on, or?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
here.
So what'll happen is, you know, we get all these vendors, we talk about all the vendors behind their back. We say, okay, this product's good for this, that product's good for that, et cetera. What do you think? What's your time frame? Client will come back to us and say, you know what,
You can.
You're good? Let me see that.
Sorry, guys. Technology, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Words and things. Do you want to talk in this
Yeah.
mic right here?
yeah.
There we go.
Okay. It's not a real mic, but
So what'll happen,
That mic is-
so clients will tell us, okay, my maintenance is due in October, so I really need to get this done. This is just for the stream. This is just for the stream. I don't think it's for the room.
Yeah, it's just, if you just talk loudly,
Okay.
we'll be able to pick up on that.
I'm fine. We don't need to stand.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll tell the partners, you know, we will curb their enthusiasm to such a degree because we can't freaking handle these phone calls at the end of the quarter. So for every one particular problem, we can get 5, 6, 7, 8 phone calls. So we're like, they're just kind of lightly shopping, maybe Q4, when really they're really interested, and it's really going to be next month, possibly.
yeah, and that's the other thing is don't call a vendor up and say we're ready to buy. We need something tomorrow because those guys they'll get your home number, they'll get your cell phone, they'll talk to your kids, they'll be at your baseball games, they'll be like, hey, so what's going on? You said you're ready. Do we need to do anything for you?
But also, I mean, I'm going to counterpoint that because that's not true of all salespeople. So this is kind of the dirty part, the underbelly, right? There are many, many good salespeople, I think, and that is a challenge. Like being honest, finding a salesperson that you trust and having that honest relationship and working together, I do think it's achievable.
Yeah.
And I do think being honest, I actually have a right now situation in my mailbox right now that I'm kind of stressing about because if I didn't know it was right now, I'm not going to go do the work right now.
Yeah.
So there is, you know, the counter to that.
Sure. One of the other things I got on here was that, you know, make sure that, you know, most vendors know that your RFP was built around your favorite product. We know this. A lot of times the first thing I get asked when that RFP comes into our company is take a look through that and see which vendor it was written for. And if we look at it, it looks like they've legitimately written a RFP based off their needs or requirements. We're going to submit to it. If we look at it and we see a lot of marketing that our vendors put in there, then we're probably going to pass on that. That's why you don't get a lot of responses to your RFPs. It's because it's a lot of work, and a lot of times there's no reward from that. But I will tell you, we have won RFPs that our vendors have put stuff in for. Sometimes we have time for them. But the other side of that is don't let vendors write your RFPs, because if I do, I'm going to put all my cool things that I can do that my other products that are out there can't do. You got any experience with that?
By policy, we do not respond to RFPs. If we have an existing client relationship, so we're a reseller, right? What our ideal position is, we don't care what you buy, but buy it from us, and we'll help you through the process. So my perspective is, if you know, I've had salespeople that want to chase like city RFPs, or they have a big RFP and they think it's their in, and I'm like, no. By policy, we don't do it. We'll help you write it for sure, but.
And a lot of times, I've gotten like 30-page RFPs, and at the end, I'm just like copy and pasting answers because, you know, it's just you do. It's the equivalent to homework your senior year of college or high school.
It's worse. It's like your term paper. It's the most horrible, and we get through it with the least amount of work that we possibly can.
Yeah. Swag, RSA conferences, drinks, my airfare, customers are paying for that. And that's an uncomfortable truth that I say, and I realize that there's probably, hopefully none of my customers in here right now, but that is baked into the price of the product that you buy. So whenever you do wear the T-shirt or whenever you go to the conference and you see the name outside, that comes from a budget. And so
so can I counterpoint
Go
since I'm
ahead.
up here? I'm paying for this out of my pocket.
yeah.
We're small. We're not, we don't have a huge marketing arm because we have to market our products and things
Right.
like that. We're a reseller, so
Yeah.
if I can't bring leads and real potential opportunities home, I don't charge my employer.
So if you guys can give me a business card, at least one, I can justify this. I'm kidding.
If I Can I ask, so I want to ask everyone here, is that what do you experience internal security folks? So is that your experience as well, that really management PO is making the decision, or is it really sort of the engineers that, at the end of the day, it's the engineers types that need to make the recommendation, and usually their boss just kind of signs off, right?
It's changed over time. It used to be management, and you had to kind of make your case to management. It's changed now. In some cases, we're actually signing POs now, but sometimes we don't know who's going to sign the PO.
Sure.
Yeah.
And often sourcing is now involved.
Yeah.
And that's just a pain in the butt, but for our perspective, it's great. You can deal with the contract, which means legalese.
Right.
And they're going to sign the contract and actually hold the contract, but they ask us, should we buy this, and is this the right price? So.
It's kind of interesting because I have seen a shift towards that. I'll tell you still though, my boss, my sales guys, they're still going to figure out who the boss is, and they're going to talk to him. And I had that happen to me when I worked at Blue Cross. I was doing an RFP. I was doing the whole process for a DLP solution, and my sales guy called in to our receptionist and said, hey, I can't get in touch with Eric, who's sitting right there. I need to talk to his boss. It's a very important, urgent thing about a PO we're having some problems with. And he got my boss's number, and suddenly he's calling my boss. My boss was like, why is this guy calling me? This is your project. Why is he talking to me? And I was very infuriated. So, you want to keep track of that.
We get you off the list, too. We remove vendors from the list that do that. It's unethical in our mind.
Yeah, it is very unethical in my opinion.
That's what I would consider like a severe violation, right?
Yeah.
So what you just described as Rapid7's basic MO, I'm not sure why you like them so much.
We like them. We love them as a reseller because
Yeah.
nobody wants to buy stuff from them, but they want their stuff.
Go to DEF CON, go to the Palms. That's why I like Rapid7. They have the best parties out there.
They do.
That's the way to choose.
Yeah, and HD is a really cool guy, but I'll tell you, there are companies similar to Rapid7 that they just run the boiler room type sales team. They have an inside sales team. They're pounding the phone all day. If you don't return their calls, I don't want to talk to you anymore. We'll talk to someone else, and they sometimes work that way. And they exist. All companies, not even security, even in general IT. Here's another little trick. If you meet the sales guy's boss, if he shows up, you're either a big fish or the guy's about to get fired. And that's I've seen that happen a lot of times. Suddenly, our VP is like, "Hey, I want to go on a trip with you guys," and then you realize these guys are getting ready to spend several millions of dollars with us, or you realize that this guy hasn't hit his quota for 3 quarters in a row, and we're trying to manage some transition right there. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And vendors also play favorites as well. If you talk to a vendor like us, and then we have a preferred partnership where we have a partner that's brought us a lot of deals in the past couple weeks, we'll sometimes push you to them to feed them, to give them opportunity. Or if we like this company here more than this company, or we like this engineer more than that analyst, we're going to work with the people that we like, the people we think are going to get the deals done for us. And that's also an unfortunate part of the game.
Yeah, and so from a reseller standpoint, this is a very important part of our business, right? Because obviously we want to position solutions that work, right? That's number one. But the business side has to be there. We have to have good relationships with the people. We have to make money on it. I mean, if they're going to give us like 10 points on a deal, that's not an option for us. We need to keep the business alive. Mm-hmm. And we spend a significant amount of time negotiating with the partners on, give and take. We bring you large opportunities, and then we expect you to, hand over and introduce us to certain clients. I mean, that is our very clear expectation. Yeah. And we will drop vendors or partners if we find that they're perhaps bringing in competitors too often or something like that.
Yeah, we had that, again, the same experience when I was at Blue Cross. There was a DLP product. We were working with a vendor. We loved the vendor. The vendor's doing a great job. And at the last minute, he comes in and he goes, "Yeah, we got to do this PO through this other company." I'm like, "Well, we don't want to do business with them. We want to do business with you guys." Well, we have to. It's this requirement we have, and it's because we don't do anything directly. That wasn't the case at all. I mean, he was just trying to feed the vendor to get them some stuff because they had so many authorized engineers that were allowed to do professional services and other things, which is the other game as well, which is the professional services game. A lot of times you'll take a cut on the product in order to sell 20,000 hours of professional services you may or may not need.
Yeah, so this was actually a huge thing. I worked at ISS for the better part of the 2000s, and professional services, we were always the red-haired stepchild. By design, the services were not to exceed 20% of the company revenue because it changed our multiplier when IBM, and I'm here to say it worked. But so we had no marketing, we had very little enhancements. We were a really, really awesome consulting team, and we succeeded in spite of the lack of support. But we would constantly get, it was a struggle because clients never wanted to pay for the services. The salespeople obviously wanted the deal, and they wanted the, part of how they position the product is that, it's easy and, you don't need a whole bunch of services to sell it. Well, guess what I was doing a year later? I was going back in, I was cleaning up their database, I was tuning their IDS, I was, writing up procedures for analyzing, there's all these things that just didn't occur. And I had some really large environments that were blowing up and security tools that would be orphaned and things like that. So we were opposite. The
Right.
selling of the services was not done as much as it should have been.
Yeah. So way that, other side, if you need the services, if you don't have the team or you don't have the expertise or you don't have time to go to the boot camp, sometimes the training's another way to look at that and offset that.
But can I also make another point real quick?
Go ahead.
So now, as a reseller, what we find we're often doing is, I'm still a consultant at heart. That's what I do. And for example, we just had a client that bought an HSM, and so we truly want to differentiate ourselves as a reseller because it's very competitive, and we have our skill sets, and we spend a lot of money on security people, so we want to put them to use. So we look at it and say, okay, where can we add value? And so, now what we'll do, we would love to sell services, but now we try to give away services just to differentiate ourselves so that they
Yeah.
buy it from us instead of another reseller.
And we actually do the other thing. We don't have a professional services arm because, we want to sell money on the products, not the services either. So, we try to get our partners to do our professional services for them. I got 2 short slides here, but this one here I was going to show you some, how you're hacked by your vendors. One is the question that only one guy can answer. That's a silly little trick that I learned when I was waiting tables that a lot of sales guys use, and that's when you've got your boss and a couple other people in the room, and you don't quite know who's making the decision. So you ask the question of like, so is this something that you guys, is your budget, is it currently is it ending in January or February? And you look and see whoever everyone looks at, and that's the guy who's ultimately you're going to be selling to. That's how you figure out the pecking order. And then the other one is, yes, she knows you're looking at you. If you've got a female who's selling the product and she's wearing a low-cut shirt, she knows as a guy that some of you guys are checking her out, and sometimes that's by design. We've had sales girls that have come through the office, and they come to the office and they're wearing sweats and all that, and they go to a sales meeting and they're looking very sultry. That's sometimes by design. It's a technique. It's a tool. Just like having being best friends with Brett Favre and mentioning that when you're at the dinner table. It's the same technique. Sorry, Elizabeth.
No, it's true. I was just thinking I've seen some funny stories. Not so funny, embarrassing actually for our gender, but
yeah. There's also the leading questions, which is the and I put this on Twitter yesterday, and it's the most ridiculous question in the world. How important are your goals to you? Is there any possible way to answer that doesn't set the sales guy up for the next question of, so you would say this is a pretty important goal to solve this problem? It's ridiculous questions that they'll ask that get you kind of nodding your head. And the idea is to get them nod their head 2 or 3 times. And so then you say, so you would say this is a product that's going to fit your needs, right? So when can you buy? And then there's the brute force honesty. I like to use that, and it's a technique that you just tell them, look, we suck at this part. Like our log product, we're not a SIM. We suck at SIM. We're not going to ever beat darkside on that product feature, but we're great at blah, 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 blah. We're good at this. We're good at that. That's one way your vendor hacks you, is get you to realize that, oh, he's being honest with me. He's looking out for my best interest.
they trick you by being honest with you.
I don't trick anybody.
This is.
That's why I got her up here, so she can call me out. And then there's the divide and conquer. I mentioned this earlier. This is one where they try to get people 2 conversations on 2 sides of the room, and while I'm having a conversation with you about speeds and feeds and bandwidth, he's having a conversation about, so you really like this. Do you want to move forward? Is this something you think we can get done in the next 2 weeks? Okay, well, I'll get you the paperwork over this afternoon, and let's go ahead and sign it. And so they try to have the conversation split off. That's something you got to watch out for.
But so let me ask you that. Does that hinder, I mean, at the end of the day, do you run into unexpected roadblocks?
Yeah.
In the 11th hour because the tech dude is like, I hate this product, and then suddenly you have 10 things that you have to overcome?
We got 2 different issues. We're a renewal-based company, and so we've got hunting and we got farming, right? We got new deals we go after, and then we got deals we try to upgrade, and then we got renewals. That is a customer satisfaction issue, is what that creates. And that's why we try to avoid that, but it does. When your boss buys something, or excuse me, your boss, whenever they buy something that you're not aware of and you got to use that product, that's the thing where you spend all year complaining. You're like, I can't get it working. I don't know what it's doing. I can't do this. Hey, these other guys are going to come in and show us a product. It's going to be even better than that, and they get thrown out the next cycle. So yeah, that absolutely happens. Open source, more like boring source. That comes up a good bit as well.
Now that's a note. I want to take that.
It's absolutely true. They can sell around open source. It's an easy thing to sell around. It's the fact of, well, yeah, absolutely. Open source can do stuff as good as my product, and there's products out there that are even better than our products. But you're going to spend a lot of time behind it. You're going to spend a lot of work behind it. If your guy who understands it inside and out knows how to rewrite it and reprogram it, if he decides to leave or get hit by a bus, the product's gone, and you got to talk to me anyway. So that's another way they try to hack you, is to keep you off the open source topic.
But that's all true.
Yeah. They're all. I mean, it's not a hack. It's the truth. You're absolutely right. It creates a single point of failure in a lot of cases, which is the person that has to run it. And then the nice to meet you. Who do you work for? We talked about that a couple times already. The last thing I got here is how you can hack your vendors back. And this is probably the things happen. But you got to also start the conversations off filling out the vendor, finding out how sincere he is to want to do business with you, finding out if he understands what your needs are. Ask questions. Research the guy you're talking to. Find out where he's worked at. If he's only been with the company for a week or 2, he probably doesn't have a solid grasp of the products he's trying to position. He's probably looking for 1 or 2 keywords. When you say compliance, he's like, oh, great, I got a great product. It's going to solve. It's PCI in a box. You pay 1 check and you're PCI compliant and you're out the door, and I can cash that check tomorrow.
So can I jump in here? I agree with your point. Another thing that I like to do is I like to go look at the vendors' job descriptions, or see what positions they have available. When they have 40 positions available for DLP and they don't have a DLP product or something like that, guess what they're going to be calling you about next week? And if you see that their requirements are 2 years experience in IT for a senior salesperson, that should tell you something.
Yeah. Find out what. Also, other cool stuff you can find out is if you look at the development positions, you can see what the platform is built off of. And you can find out that really under the hood, it's running Windows and using C# or some kind of esoteric programming language that's no longer supported. That might be a red flag that this product might not be around much longer. Gotcha. Yeah, ask for references and call them. I can't tell you how many times people ask us for references, and we give them the guys' names, and they never call. They just want to make sure you got them. This worked for me when I was doing my DLP project at Blue Cross. I got a list of references from 2 different vendors, and one of the vendors, I called the guy up, and the guy's like, yeah, we love it. It's a great product. I was like, well, how do you currently have it deployed? Well, I only have it in a lab because we're DoD, we can't really put it on our production network, but it works great in a lab. I'm like, so you haven't really used this in a production environment? Well, no, but we followed their test plan, and it worked perfectly. So, of course it did. Call them out on that. And then after they've shown you the goods and you've seen a lot of vendors, then start the RFP process. Again, you might not get a lot of responses, but find out what your needs are. Find out what you liked about the product, what you didn't like, and then decide what you want to get from that. And a lot of...
Just be realistic about what you're looking for, and try not to buy into the bloat and the features that are added because Gartner didn't put them in the right quadrant.
Yeah. Also, that's another thing. Pull up Gartner, look at the quadrant, look at the cons they have over there, and ask them about that. I mean, it's just like if someone comes to interview and they got a weak spot, ask them if they've improved that. Say, what are you guys planning to do? Gartner says you guys stink at this. Are you guys investing in that? Are you going to improve that? The other things, ask for a 6-day guarantee on pricing. Ensure you're researching in good faith, but be honest. Tell the guy, I'm not looking to buy anytime soon. I just want to know what's out there. Or if he calls you, I'm willing to look at your products. I don't have a lot of time, and I don't have time to get in a sales cycle. So I'm not buying this year, but I'd love to look at your products, and next year there might be a fit for it. But expect that call, towards the end of the Q3 saying, hey, next year's coming up fast. Do you want to go ahead and start talking? And then the last 2 things, price is often the deciding factor, but make sure you have a reason for buying what you're buying. And then go to lunch, talk to the SE. They're the ones that know how the product really works. Don't waste a lot of time with the sales guy unless he's the guy you need to be talking to. If you're worried about price, you're worried about company reputation, stuff like that guy's going to have some answers, but he's not going to know stuff about roadmap. He's not going to know stuff about blind spots in the product. And then the last part, I got my contact info.
Oh, can I add just one point?
Please do.
Consider a reseller, finding somebody that you trust. In all seriousness, I'm not just plugging our business, but find someone that you trust, that you can talk to, that knows the full breadth of the industry, that spends time with it and can tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Someone that's really plugged into the industry.
The good point of that, I'll just go out real quick, is we do have that happen a lot of times where a VAR will come in and they will be the trusted advisor for the people. They'll hold us off and keep us an arm's length. So if you have a good one, you can tell them, look, I don't want to hear from any of these vendors directly. I want to talk to you. If I have a question, I ask you and you get me the answer to it. If I want a conversation with a vendor, you're going to arrange and set that up so I can talk to the vendor or their engineering staff. But I don't want this guy showing up randomly. Don't want him calling my bosses. And they're going to be the people that say, all right, I'll keep him at arm's length. And I will tell them he's not interested. This isn't the right product for him. And they'll break up for you, if you will.
Have you heard of Glassdoor.com?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever use that for kind of vendor hacking?
Sometimes we do. Glassdoor, LinkedIn. Glassdoor is kind of interesting because a lot of times we use that for our competition when we're scouting out other salespeople. Kind of gives you an idea of how much they're making and how much you got to offer to pay them. But we also use that to figure out disgruntled employees. If they have a known list of security engineers that say these guys buy the worst products and they don't ever consult us and everything, well, you got a good idea of who you're going to be talking to and who's going to be deciding your product. It also lets you know if you're talking to an analyst who loves your product, it doesn't matter. It's still his boss that makes that call of whether he's going to get it or not.
Could be hacking tips on customer references. I mean, that's one of our big things is to try to reach actual customers before we...
It depends on the install base. We got like 1,600 customers across lots of verticals. I would recommend ask for someone that's in your same vertical space. Ask for someone that's local if you can. And the reason why is because you might be able just to say, hey, look, this is great. Do you go to any ISSA meetings or NIISG? Are you going to be at this thing next week? And then you can talk to them face to face because, let's be honest, references, they don't reference your product just because they absolutely love it. Those guys exist. A lot of cases, they're getting better discounts. We flipped them over, an iPad for doing something like that in the past. There's some quid pro quo there. But if you look someone in the eye, you can figure out real quickly, do they legitimately like the product? Does it legitimately meet their needs, which those guys exist? Or are these guys just doing it because they're in bed with the vendor and they have a great relationship with them?
Yeah, and have a conversation too, right? Not sometimes you can tell if they're tight-lipped and it's a yes/no answer. Like when we give references for our services, I strongly encourage. I typically, because we're under NDA with the services, I can't say what we're doing. I can't tell the person that's calling, but I strongly encourage them to have a conversation and not just ask yes/no.
Yeah. Questions? All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I promise you guys I'm not as smarmy as I appear. I'm actually a legitimate guy.
And
I got a soul.
Eric's company actually is one of the good ones, I will say.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Hope you enjoy that iPad. All right, guys. Thank you all.